Thanks for coming, everyone. Good afternoon. My name's Chris Atherton, Senior Research Engagement Manager at GÉANT. I'm the sub-task leader for fibre sensing, along with my colleague Hannah Mihai, who's here today. And our subtask is ably led by Susanna from FAU, who is also here too. What we wanted to do today is to talk you through the results that we've observed after we ran the fibre sensing survey with NRENs across Europe. Just to give you an idea about fibre sensing, or why fibre sensing is important, there are lots of different use cases for fibre sensing. So things like seismology, anthropogenic movements, oceanography, volcanology, benthic flows. There's lots of different use cases that we've identified. And if you would like more information about that, we have a document which we produced, I think it was last year, which goes through some of the different use cases that are available with fibre sensing. The thing that we're looking at, you can kind of put down as two kind of arms of fibre sensing. One is called scattering-based sensing, and this is where we send a laser into a fibre, and that then every time there's a reflection that comes back from the point that it bounces off the side of the cable, that then becomes a sensing point and creates kind of like a static sensor at that location. What we can do then is convert a fibre optic cable into a series of sensors, 32,000 sensors, for example, along the length. It doesn't go all of the way along, but it allows you to turn it into a very high resolution sensor. The other types of fibre optic sensing technologies are to do with forward-based transmission sensing. So this is commonly known as state of polarization and also phase sensing. This is where we send the laser through the cable and we observe the laser as it comes out at the other end. And from that, we can correlate whereabout along the cable a perturbation has occurred. And then we have like an aggregate of all of the stretches and strains along the entire length of the cable that we then need to pick apart to find the signals, so that we can then convert that into something that's of use for the different research communities that are also looking at the different types of scientific use cases. That's just a very brief introduction. There are a few other introductions that we've developed as a subtask, which you can find also on the GÉANT TV channel and on our training program, which should be released soon. Why is this of use for NRENs? Well, fibre sensing is an emerging technology. It's disruptive. It challenges the way that we look at infrastructure. It now turns cables from a means of transporting data into a way of generating data itself by utilizing that fibre for sensing. And so this is one of the main reasons why we tried to ask NRENs what was of interest to them and how fibre sensing could be used by them. So this is where I'm going to then start talking now about what do European NRENs think about fibre sensing and in general the survey results that we've collected. The survey we designed was two parts. The first one was a quantitative survey, which was mainly done through an online survey form. And the second part of it was a qualitative survey. This was where we asked specific NRENs who'd responded to the first part if we could ask them a few more questions to get a better understanding of what they thought. We explored the interest that an NREN has and the current status of fibre sensing activities, both in country and with that NREN. We looked at challenges and barriers to utilising this technology, and we also looked into the knowledge and awareness so that we could evaluate the familiarity that an NREN has with fibre sensing technologies and the related research that comes with that. In total, we had 26 respondents to our survey, so just a little over half of the GÉANT member base. 22 of those NRENs at least said that they were interested in fibre sensing, either that they were currently deploying fibre sensing themselves, or that they were in the process of working with a research group, or in the process themselves of deploying it, or that they had a general interest in fibre sensing and wished to investigate the technology in more depth. Only 4 NRENs said that they weren't interested. One of those previously had said that they were interested in should switch to the next slide. One of them did say that they were interested in in fibre sensing in the past, but the research group that they were working with went quiet, and so they've changed from an interested into a not interested at the moment, but could be in the future. There were a few NRENs that didn't respond, which we are aware are working on fibre sensing, or at least there's fibre sensing activities going on within their country. But on the whole, it's quite a good representation of the change over time in interest, whereas I think it was 2022-23, there were about 8 NRENs that were interested in fibre sensing in general through their involvement in the GÉANT project, and now that's now at 22. So we can see over time that there has been a rather big growth in interest from our community in this particular technology. Of the 22 NRENs that responded, 15 are interested primarily in terrestrial sensing, whereas 8 were only interested in submarine sensing. Most of the interest that we have from the community is in supporting research, which is not unsurprising, but also in infrastructure monitoring. And that's where we, in the qualitative survey, went into more depth to investigate what that actually means. In terms of the technologies that we're looking at, of the forward and through transmission-based technologies that I spoke of before, DAS, or distributed acoustic sensing, and SOP, state of polarization, seem to be the most popular of the 2 technologies that are being investigated. But for more information about the quantitative survey, I'm going to hand now over to my colleague Hannah.
So as Chris said, we sent out this survey through the GÉANT mailing list. We got great responses. We were quite happy, even though we had to push a little bit sometimes to some of the NRENs to actually get a response. But yeah, I think we can be quite happy with the amount of answers that we got. The NRENs that we talked to, a lot of them had connections out into the real world, so out to the universities and other research organizations, and they are working together with different kinds of researchers. The main part is seismology and geophysics, which does make sense because they are the ones that are the most traditionally involved in, if you can say so, about the new technology. But we also have had NRENs replying that they are working together with marine biology or oceanography. So it's all research disciplines that are showing how stuff is moving around the cable. So with seismology, that makes sense because once the earth is shaking, the cable is shaking along, and then the signal is changing. With oceanography, it's the water around the cable. If the water is moving and the pressure can change in the cable, and this is also measurable. And with the marine biology, it's whales or other big mammals moving over the cable, moving the water, and making this motion measurable. We had a few more that were also interested in protection and infrastructure, which is also a research field, but it was less prominent and comes in more later in the survey. For example, when we're starting to look at what are NRENs interested in when it's about their own benefit and their own purposes. A lot of them are, so what you see here is the number of respondents on the one axis and the questions that we had on the other axis. It's always first terrestrial, so fiber sensing for terrestrial purposes, and then for the same question for submarine purposes all the way through. So we can see that we have a bigger interest in terrestrial sensing in general. And the most interesting part for NRENs is infrastructure monitoring, which kind of makes sense because they're already using other techniques in order to monitor their infrastructure, because if it's broken, it's pretty bad. We want that it works as it should. They can also use this to monitor the optical signal quality and health, and intrusion detection, both on terrestrial and submarine links. The NRENs are interested in different technologies. As one of the main findings, as Chris has mentioned in the beginning, it's mainly DAS and SOP. Some of the NRENs are not really sure what the difference is between the two technologies, which probably means we have to inform them better of what it is and what you can do with it. Some are also unsure what they want to deploy on their cable. But we do have a big part of the NRENs that is interested or has already deployed some interrogators on their cables and are doing research on that. A very important part that we have discovered in this project, but also other projects like Submerge, for example, is that policies are very important. I mean, they are always important, but especially in the context of fiber sensing, they are important because you are detecting data or collecting data of an environment that is contested depending on where you're looking at, especially if it's a submarine environment. It is extremely complicated to figure out who can do what, who owns data, how can we publish it, are there any national security agencies involved in that? Do they have an interest of not publishing it? How can researchers get access to the data they want? And the problem that we could see from our survey are that the countries do not have any policies in place for a large majority, or they don't know if there are policies in place, which possibly means there are none if they don't know. And some waiting is happening for some European or national guidelines for this new technology. But 4 respondents had actually specific policies in place that they're trying to follow when collecting this data. We also asked them about barriers. So what do NRENs consider as challenging when they are thinking about fiber sensing, and why they are not more involved than they are. And it is not very surprising that they are lacking funding. I mean, money is always an issue. And they are lacking the manpower and the knowledge on the technology. Some also are lacking the infrastructure or interrogators, but that is, in my opinion, also correlated with funding. If we would all have unlimited funding, we could all just lay a few fibers dedicated to fiber sensing out and put our own interrogators on it. Yes. And now I'm handing back to Chris with the qualitative results.
Do European NRENs think about about fiber sensing? There was a limited there was a limited number of NRENs that we interviewed for this part of the survey. That was partly due to the limited sample size that we had and also time constraints. We wanted to quickly be able to go through and talk to a good subset of the overall survey or quantitative survey respondees. The types of people that we wanted to talk to were limited to the network operations personnel or network engineers or another stakeholder such as the NREN management that were directly involved in monitoring the network performance, maintaining or managing the fibre infrastructure. As I said, there were 4 interviewees that we talked to, DeiC, Aconet, EENet and Rediris. So thanks again to them for taking part in that. We spoke to them roughly between 30 and 60 minutes. And yeah, the questions that we asked were standardized so that everyone got the same questions. So we can kind of get a good frame for the results to make sure that they're aligned across all of the different respondees. The thing that we focused on with these questions, like I said before, was about the use of fiber sensing by the NREN for their own purposes. So not so much focused on the research or supporting research, but on an NREN's own interest in using fiber sensing for their own needs. Specifically to look into this question of infrastructure monitoring, which came up in the overall quantitative survey. And the people that we spoke to were not researchers, which is obvious because we're focusing on the infrastructure side, but they may well have some expertise in that. So yeah, we were trying to be careful not to mix the research support side with the infrastructure side of things. So yeah, we helped to define the scope with the respondents. We kind of expected some outputs already around fault detection and performance improvement or security assurance. We also looked at the tools and the data sources that are used to go into that in a little bit more depth. Also, the processes and the decision making that was used in implementing fiber sensing, and also to identify potential gaps and emerging needs, and also to look at the limitations of existing approaches and their interest in new monitoring or sensing solutions in general. So the main themes that we had, there were about, if I remember rightly, 7, and we'll go through each of them now. So the first theme that came out was that fiber sensing from an operational conceptualization focuses more on infrastructure protection, which again is understandable given that infrastructure monitoring is something that's of interest to the NRENs that we surveyed overall. Although the primary role, which was repeated, is to support research communities from an operational context, NRENs see this as a way of identifying faults or intrusion attempts on the network, and to provide operational assurance. Also, for quickly identifying where an incident occurs, so that a resolution team or a resolution can occur as quickly as possible, to direct a team to a specific location to fix whatever the problem is. So it's more about incident response and fault detection, combined with this idea of intrusion protection, which seemed to be one of the primary themes which came out of the interviews. Some of the examples that people gave for this were things like identifying a time or a location if someone was opening a manhole cover, and generating evidence for post-incident analysis. But like I said before, it's about outage localization, repair efficiency, and precise fault detection, so that they can speed up incident resolution. 3 out of the 4 interviewees suggested this, so we think that's quite a strong driver. But because it's only 3 out of the 4, it's not as universal as using fiber sensing to support scientific communities, if you see what I mean. The second theme, this was, and I've realised the last bit has been cut off, sorry about that, but the second theme was more using how NRENs perceive the use of fiber sensing. So this one has caused quite a bit of debate internally when we were reviewing the document, which goes to support this survey, and that we found that people have started to make a distinction between the operational use of fiber sensing and scientific use of fiber sensing. From our perspective as the survey runners, we can see that the data that's used and generated can be used both by operational teams and by scientists. It's the same raw data, but there is a distinction emerging within the community between operational monitoring and scientific use of that same data. And this is typically to do with how current fiber sensing approaches are used within NRENs. So for those that run their own fiber, they likely have OTDRs already deployed on the backbone network, and they use OTDRs to detect changes or faults and to try and localize where fault is. With things, for example, like DAS, distributed acoustic sensing, this is just a very, very fancy OTDR, but it adds an extra layer of interrogation that a normal OTDR, which we use currently, doesn't give. So you can detect things like acoustic vibrations on a particular cable, which a normal OTDR isn't able to pick up. So there may be a link between the technologies and the advancement in the technologies and the concept of using that new technology for operational purposes. As in, some people perceive the difference to be this one is only used for science, whereas we're just using OTDR and we don't want to, or we don't foresee the use, one is used for science and the other is used only for operational purposes in a very limited scope. But ultimately, it's the same data that's being used by both communities. So this is why we came up with this theme of NRENs already monitor extensively. And this was shown by some of the NRENs that we interviewed running daily OTDR sweeps on the network. Some already have quite a lot of extensive experience with using fiber sensing in an operational setting. But because of the new technology that's coming in, they don't perceive what they already do as fibre sensing. So yeah, sadly it's slightly cut off, but what we wanted to try and get across is that fibre sensing is seen as an advanced form of monitoring, and that in order to adopt this advanced form of monitoring, it gives certain extra how to describe it, certain extra advantages over the existing OTDR systems, such as higher temporal resolution, greater spatial insight, and an increased awareness of what's going on around the cables. For theme 3, we found that one of the strongest perceived values lies in earlier detection, localization, and a shared understanding of link degradation. So this is kind of linked to what I said in theme 1 about this need to respond more quickly to threats and incidents, and to increase that response time. But the value that fibre sensing brings is with that increased earlier detection and localization of a particular fault. So with some of the respondees, there are performance issues that they all reported where fibre sensing could have had a greater advantage over traditional monitoring approaches in order to speed up that fault resolution. But in order to do that, there needs to be better integration with their existing tool sets, which isn't always there with fibre sensing, or at least with the two main technologies that people are talking about in the survey, which was DAS and SOP. One of the things that did come out was that there could also be a better means of collaboration with this technology with other potential third parties, such as fibre operators. One interviewee suggested that for them, they get rung by the fibre operator if there's a link down to see if they have been affected, and they would prefer if this was provided in an automated way. So if a particular link does go down, or fibre link goes down, and you know the specific location and time that that incident occurred, that could then be shared with a third party. This falls more into the data management side of things, but it is something that came out as a potential way of utilising this advanced type of monitoring with other parties that are not just the national NREN, say for example suppliers or other NRENs. This would also then facilitate access to research groups as well, but that's kind of like an extra story. For theme 4, security and temper detection were meaningful drivers for those who own the fibre. And I think that of the survey respondents that we spoke to, or at least the interviewees, 2 of them owned their own fibre and 2 of them didn't. They largely leased the fibre. For those who owned their own fibre, tamper detection was prominent in the way that they were responding, and the idea of where the infrastructure monitoring could really help them. Whereas those who were leasing the fibre, it was an issue, but it wasn't the primary thing that they were looking at. It was more of a nice to have to be able to have tamper detection. So security and the physical security and threat awareness around the fibre is of interest to the NRENs that we talk to. but especially for those who own their own fibre, that's where this has really come into the fore and is quite a strong motivator for why they have an interest in fibre sensing. For theme 5, what came out was structural and organisational constraints strongly shape the feasibility, often more than the interest. And this is going back to what Hannah mentioned before in the survey results, where people said person power, having access to the infrastructure, to the interrogators, and ultimately funding is one of the biggest barriers or constraints that they have. And this was reflected in the interviews as well. There is a constraint that people have, and that constraint limits what people are able to do. So although there's quite a strong interest in fibre sensing, how that then develops in terms of the feasibility of deployment feasibility of deployment, that's limited by the resources that people have. It sounds very obvious when you say it, but I think that will limit the overall scalability of the deployments that we're able to look at as a wider community. But this then poses a risk of fragmentation because ultimately, if we don't coordinate and do things as a collective group, then people can then start to deploy their own deployments to meet their own interests, but don't necessarily fit in with a wider grand strategy for fibre sensing as a whole group. So it becomes a bit more ad hoc in the approaches that are taken. For this, we definitely saw the community coordination of fibre sensing services would be a real benefit. That's not necessarily to say a centralised fibre sensing service, but rather a federated approach where we all agree on the way to approach this and deploy in a similar fashion, so that we can have conformity and conformity across all of the different sites where fibre sensing services are deployed by NRENs. Theme 6, the scientific use cases are present, but NRENs see themselves mainly as facilitators, not operators. So this again comes down to the resource question as well, I believe, because some of the interrogators are quite expensive to operate, and so based on the available resources, one thing that NRENs can do relatively easily is to provide the facilitation of providing access to fibres to support scientific research groups, where the scientists bring their own interrogator, and there's opportunities there for collaboration between the research groups and the NREN. But the NRENs generally, when we spoke to these 4, saw themselves more as the infrastructure providers, the hosts for the equipment, and the enablers of the research, so that it helps with the deployment of the interrogators. When we looked at how this could relate to NRENs specifically, they saw it more for using sensors for the operational use of sensors on the network. Like I said before, it's the same raw data that could be used by both the NRENs and the research groups, but this is more of an opportunity to use this kind of sensing data, if deployed as a byproduct, to support and facilitate research groups and to support operational use of fibre sensing on their own networks. But the main constraint that came out from all of them, all of the interviewees, is that the deployment of fibre sensing tools and techniques can't interfere with the operational capacity of the network. think that goes without saying. This is why, in a lot of cases in the past, researchers and NRENs have looked to try and get access to dark fibre so that it's clearly completely separated. The problem with that approach is it then becomes costly if you don't have access to large numbers of fibres. Here, this kind of goes towards the greening approach, where you can reuse existing investment in infrastructure, because it has been proven that you can have fibre sensing interrogators coexist with operational DWDM traffic. So it's still a concern, I think, for some NRENs about what that impact is going to be on the operational network. But we have seen evidence where it doesn't impact on the operations of the network. That is to say, while it's running, it still would impact during the setup, because you've obviously got to bring an optical link down in order to deploy filters, to then bring an optical link back up again with the fibre sensing interrogators attached. The seventh final theme was that there seems to be a clear and repeated opportunity for a GÉANT and GÉANT community-led coordination and services with fibre sensing. So the gaps and opportunities that were identified were things like a coordination action at a European level, ideally through the GÉANT project, but also shared learning across the different NRENs, a need for joint development of tooling, which I spoke about slightly before when I was saying about the sharing of data between different jurisdictions. You could call them domains or third parties, but there is still this kind of cross-border sharing of data that needs to take place in some cases where a fibre sensing interrogator collects data from another jurisdiction. There's also a wish that there was a special interest group that could come together to allow the sharing of this information and facilitation of coordination. So yeah, that could be a suitable platform that we can then explore through the GÉANT project as well. But also the value proposition of the GÉANT project and the community is through the shared interpretation of frameworks, reference architectures and training, and to look at managed or federated services as a community. So I've spoken a lot about the different themes. I'm going to hand over back now to Hannah, who's going to go through the conclusions.
We have now, from the survey and from the interviews, reached three main conclusions that you have probably could already hear through the presentation so far. So NRENs are interested in fibre sensing because they want to make cutting edge research possible. They want to give scientists access to large amounts of data. For a lot of them, it's really a absolutely fascinating new instrument that gives them a lot more coverage than they had before. This is not necessarily true for seismologists who already have like a globe spanning infrastructure of seismometers, but for specifically oceanographers who have access only to single points of buoys, which are really expensive and hard to maintain. If they would get access to this around the world spanning network of fiber cables as sensors, basically, that is absolutely great for them. The second main conclusion that we have is that NRENs are interested in infrastructure protection. This has become more and more clear over the last few years, with more fiber cuts specifically in the Baltic Sea. And the threat of this extremely critical infrastructure is there, and the NRENs are aware and want to protect it. And on top of that, we have the theme number 3 with the infrastructure monitoring. NRENs want to be able to detect the physical changes in their infrastructure for network health to ensure that the traffic is running as it should without any disruptions. And if there are disruptions, they want to know where the problem is and fix it as fast as possible. And we have made it through. Are there any questions? And thank you for your attention.